All right, everyone, get ready because today we are going deep into the history of Yarmouth, Nova Scotia.
Ooh, Yarmouth.
But not the kind of history you just read in any old textbook.
All right.
We've got some excerpts from a book simply titled Yarmouth, Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And this author is really on a mission to correct the record
Hmm.
on some overlooked or even misrepresented parts of Yarmouth's history,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to the Acadian people.
Interesting.
So it's like this author has taken kind of a magnifying glass to those accepted stories
Uh-huh.
that we hear about Yarmouth and said, hold on a second,
Yeah.
there's way more to this.
I like that.
And they're starting by calling out some big names and big events,
Oh, really?
like Champlain, that famous explorer.
Right.
So the book really dives deep into his description of Yarmouth Harbor
Okay.
and suggests that maybe there's been some misinterpretations about what he actually found there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, like what he was actually describing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it doesn't stop there.
Hmm.
This author goes on to challenge that commonly held belief
Uh-huh.
that Anthony Landers was single-handedly responsible for establishing Yarmouth's foreign trade.
Oh, really?
So was this whole like Landers was the economic hero of Yarmouth just a myth?
Well, it seems so.
What's the real story then?
Well, while Landers did play a part,
Okay.
especially in bringing skilled workers from England,
Right.
it was much more of a collaborative effort.
Hmm.
The success of Yarmouth's economy
Yep.
was actually built on community cooperation.
That's a really good point because it's so easy to just simplify history
Absolutely.
and just focus on those individual heroes.
Yeah,
But this really reminds us that a community thrives when everyone's working together.
for sure.
So before we get too far ahead, let's rewind a bit.
Okay.
Because Yarmouth's history goes back
Yeah,
way before the Acadians.
right.
The book even mentions the possibility of Vikings,
Vikings.
the Northmen,
Wow.
reaching Yarmouth
No way.
as early as 1007,
Wow.
calling it Vinland.
Uh,
And they even point to what might be a runic inscription on a rock
a runic inscription.
near Yarmouth Bay.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's been studied for over 45 years by experts who believe it could date back to that early Viking period.
Wow. Talk about a history mystery.
Right.
Okay, so maybe Vikings definitely a lot of community spirit.
Yeah.
But let's get to the heart of our dive today,
Yeah.
the Acadians.
The Acadians, so they arrived in the early 1700s,
Right.
and get this, they lived peacefully alongside the Mi'kmaq people,
Oh,
the
wow.
indigenous people of that region.
Interesting.
The book even goes into the linguistic connections
Uh-huh.
between these two cultures,
Yeah.
which I think is fascinating.
Right, and you can actually still see those connections today.
Yeah.
The names of places all around Yarmouth.
Oh, really? Like what?
For instance, Chibog
Okay.
comes from the Mi'kmaq word Chiputnatikuk, meaning lowland near the river.
Oh, wow.
It's like a physical reminder that they've been there for so long.
Yeah, it's like you said, a tangible reminder.
Yeah.
So peaceful coexistence,
Mm.
shared language.
Uh-huh.
Sounds like a pretty harmonious start.
Yeah.
But then
But then,
things take a really dark turn with the Acadian expulsion of 1755.
right.
And for those who might not know, this is when thousands of Acadians were forcibly removed from their homes by the British.
It was a horrific event, and this book really does not shy away from the scale of this tragedy,
Yeah.
using specific numbers to illustrate just how many families were torn apart and scattered.
Wow.
And it even talks about the challenges that those who managed to return faced when they tried to rebuild their lives.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine the resilience it must have taken
Yeah,
to even try to put the pieces back together after something like that.
for sure.
But, Acadians are known for their strength and their perseverance,
Absolutely.
especially in Argyll Township.
Right.
The book really paints a picture of this really unique community.
Incredibly close-knit and industrious.
Yeah.
Really overcoming immense hardship.
Right.
The author highlights figures like Simon d'Entremont,
Okay.
who had a really remarkable political career.
Wow.
And the book emphasizes the Acadian contributions to shipbuilding,
Uh-huh.
seafaring, and even agriculture.
It's inspiring to see how they not only rebuilt their lives, but how they thrived
Yeah,
after such adversity.
for sure.
But we also have to remember that during this time, Yarmouth was attracting settlers from all different backgrounds.
Right, and that's where we start to see how Yarmouth's history becomes this tapestry of cultures.
Yeah.
The book is just filled with stories of families from different origins coming together,
Mhm.
sometimes through really challenging circumstances.
Like what?
Well, there are even connections to the Plymouth settlers
Wow.
and tales of shipwrecked boys who find new families in Yarmouth.
Wow, it sounds like such a melting pot of different backgrounds and experiences.
It really is.
So did this blending of cultures, did that have an impact on how Yarmouth developed as a town?
Absolutely. As more settlers arrived, Yarmouth began to transform.
Okay.
You can see that in the development of roads and bridges, and even the establishment of a courthouse.
Right.
All the hallmarks of a bustling town
Yeah.
in the making.
Right. So we've got this picture of Yarmouth growing, But I'm guessing it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh, definitely not.
Were there any, like, hiccups along the way?
Oh, yeah. The book talks about challenges like harsh winters and economic struggles,
Yeah,
things that would test the most determined settlers.
right,
And of course, we can't forget about the War of 1812
right.
and the impact of those pesky privateers.
Privateers, those are basically just pirates, right?
Yeah, pretty much preying on merchant ships, disrupting trade.
Yeah, that must have been a bit of a setback for Yarmouth.
Absolutely. But even with these challenges, Yarmouth continued to evolve and grow.
Hmm.
And remember how we talked about the importance of community?
Yeah,
That spirit really comes into play when we look at how Yarmouth viewed Confederation.
right. Confederation, for those who might not know, that's when Nova Scotia, along with other provinces, joined to form Canada in 1867.
Exactly.
So what's the story? There was everyone in Yarmouth on board with this big change.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The book challenges that common assumption that Yarmouth politicians were all enthusiastic supporters of Confederation. In fact, it suggests that some were quite opposed to the idea,
Really?
worried about the potential economic downsides for the region.
So there were some heated debates happening in those town hall meetings.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's fascinating to see how these major events played out at the local level.
Yeah, you really get a sense of the different perspectives.
Right, and it reminds us that even in a tight-knit community, there are going to be different viewpoints,
For sure.
and sometimes those tough decisions to make.
Absolutely.
And speaking of different perspectives, we can't forget about the Mi'kmaq people and their ongoing presence in Yarmouth.
Right.
The book does a great job of highlighting their rich language and culture,
Mm-hmm.
even providing like a glossary of Mi'kmaq words and their meanings.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
I'm glad they included that.
Me too.
It's so important to recognize and appreciate the indigenous cultures that have been part of this land for centuries.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about language, right?
No.
There's a whole world of traditions and stories woven into the fabric of Mi'kmaq culture.
Right. Their language is so deeply connected to the landscape of Nova Scotia.
Mm.
You see it in the names of places,
Yeah.
but also in their understanding of the natural world.
Mm.
The book even includes the Mi'kmaq names for the months of the year,
Oh, wow.
the phases of the moon,
Okay.
and even a beautiful rendition of the Lord's Prayer in their language.
Wow, a Mi'kmaq version of the Lord's Prayer. That must be incredible to hear.
It really is.
You know, one thing that strikes me as we're going through all this is the author's passion for getting this history right.
Yeah.
It's clear they did their research,
Uh-huh.
but it's more than that. They're not just presenting facts, they're telling a story,
Right.
sharing the voices of those who might have been overlooked in the past.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this book and our dive into it so compelling.
Yeah.
We're not just learning about dates and events.
Right.
We're engaging with a historian's attempt to really illuminate the often hidden complexities of Yarmouth's past.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle,
Yeah.
uncovering those missing pieces.
Uh-huh.
They give us a fuller, richer picture of what life was really like in Yarmouth.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what other hidden gems are out there
Yeah.
just waiting to be discovered? What other untold stories are waiting to be brought to light?
Well, that's the beauty of history, isn't it?
It is.
There's always more to uncover, more to learn.
Always.
And sometimes those discoveries can completely change the way we understand the past.
I agree.
And as we kind of delve deeper into Yarmouth's story,
Yeah.
we see how these individual lives, these
Mhm.
communities, these historical events,
Yeah.
they all intertwine
They do.
to create this unique tapestry of this town.
It's fascinating.
And what's even more fascinating is how those threads continue to connect to the present day.
Hmm.
I mean, the decisions made by those early settlers,
Yeah.
the challenges they faced, the
Uh.
relationships they built,
Mhm.
all of that has shaped the Yarmouth we know today. You know, as we're talking about these connections to the present, I can't help but think about all that genealogical information packed into this book.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a treasure trove for anyone interested in tracing their Yarmouth roots.
It is. There are names and dates and family connections. You
Mhm.
could spend hours just getting lost in the details.
Especially if you have ancestors from the area.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder if there are any, like, surprising connection hidden in those family trees. You know, like maybe someone listening right now could discover they're related to one of those early settlers we've been talking about.
Oh, wouldn't that be something? It
Yeah.
really highlights that sense of interconnectedness that
Yeah.
the author emphasizes.
Ah.
How despite the diverse origins of Yarmouth's residents,
Yeah.
there's this shared history that binds them together.
It's like a giant family reunion.
It is.
Spanning generations and continents.
Absolutely.
But these connections go beyond just bloodlines, right?
Right.
The book also talks about the growth of Yarmouth Town
Uh-huh.
and how it became a thriving center for commerce and culture.
Right. The author traces that development from those early institutions,
Yeah.
like the courthouse and roads, to the establishment of banks and schools,
Okay.
and even the Yarmouth Steamship Company.
Wow.
It's remarkable how this once small settlement transformed into this bustling port town,
Right.
connecting Yarmouth to the wider world.
So it wasn't just about economics.
No,
There was a real sense of community spirit driving that growth.
definitely.
Didn't the book also mention the rise of social organization?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
those agricultural societies and Masonic lodges?
Exactly. It shows how community building goes beyond just physical infrastructure. It's about shared values, social connections, a sense of belonging.
Right.
And that really shines through in this book, this
Yeah.
deep appreciation for the people who shaped Yarmouth's history.
Yeah.
Not just the big names, but those everyday folks
Right.
whose contributions were no less significant.
It's like they're saying, hey, these are the people who built this town,
Yeah.
who made it what it is today.
Exactly.
And it makes you think about all the unsung heroes in our own communities.
Right.
The people who work behind the scenes to make things happen.
For sure.
So we've explored a lot of ground in our deep dive into Yarmouth,
We have.
challenged accepted narratives,
Uh-huh.
uncovered hidden connections,
Yeah,
and discovered a community that thrived despite immense challenges.
absolutely.
We've also seen how history is never just a collection of facts and dates.
No.
It's a living, breathing story,
Right.
full of twists and turns, triumphs and tragedies, and most importantly, people.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up,
Mm,
I can't help but wonder what's next for Yarmouth.
that's a good question.
Will it continue to be this hub of innovation and cultural exchange?
I hope so.
Will it embrace its rich and diverse heritage while forging a new path forward?
Those are great questions, and ones that I think we as engaged citizens should be asking ourselves,
Yeah.
not just about Yarmouth, but about our own communities.
Right.
How can we learn from the past to create a better future?
Hmm.
How can we ensure that all voices are heard and all perspectives valued as we move forward?
So what does this all mean for you?
Well,
Well, I hope this deep dive into Yarmouth's history has sparked a sense of curiosity,
yeah.
maybe even a desire to explore your own family history,
Hmm.
or learn more about the place you call home.
And remember, history is not just something I read about in books.
Yes.
It's all around us waiting to be discovered.
Right.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper into these fascinating stories that shape our world.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through Yarmouth's past.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, happy diving. CCO.